Grace Talks. It's a Thursday. It's good to be back. Long time since we've done a podcast, but it's so good to be back. Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you guys for listening and liking and subscribing on all that good stuff. And special day today. I'm here in Dallas, Texas at Christ for the Nations Institute. And have a very, very special guest. And this is going to be a good interview. It's going to be a fun time. The director of, you're the COO of Christ for the Nations Institute, Mr. Golan Lindsey is here. Hello. You hear the people clapping for you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Wow, that is a standing ovation. Hey, calm down. I never get that kind of reaction on this show. I don't know why, but it just always happens for the guests. I guess they appreciate the guests more than they do me. That's all right. Golan, how are you doing today?
Well, it's been a wild beginning of the year for me. We just finished our school about a month ago here at CFNI, closing things down. We have YFN here, our camps, summer camps that we got going, about 4,000 kids coming through this campus. So there's a lot happened last year, and so this year is something new for me that the Lord's been just growing in me, and it's been an exciting time. I've probably grown more in the Lord this semester, this year than any other time.
See, I wasn't going to ask you that, but I think that's a pretty pertinent question about the season that we just are coming out of, the COVID time, the shutting down. You got shut down pretty extensively, right, at the beginning of 2020, which seems like 40 years ago now, or 40 years have passed during that time.
Yeah, we did. As soon as the country shut everything down, we had to. I don't know if we would have. I know from my grandparents and my parents how they live. They're a little different. So if it was up to them, they might not have shut down. But because they are going to obey the law and what the government says, we did close down at the end of the semester in the spring of 2020. We then did open up on August the 14th, for about a week or two, and then we were hit with about 150 COVID cases on our campus. So we closed down immediately, and then we began. Then there was. Well, we can get into that later, but the big situation happened here at Christ for the Nations. And when I got put back in place, I began to slowly open things back up week by week. And then by the end of October, I had everything open back up, and we never had another case from that point on.
Oh, wow. So students were quarantined for a little bit. Things were stagnant in terms of student interaction and getting out and doing things. How were you able to teach and get these students still growing in their faith during that period of time?
Well, we had an excellent team. Our academic dean immediately was able to get us on Zoom, and we had our classes via online, and we had that going. When we came back in, we started school up again. We had them all in person, but when we had to shut down again, we had both. So we had them back online, and then for the rest of the semester, they had an option when we opened back up. They could either stay online or they can come back in person.
And then coming out of 2021, coming out of 2020, now things are starting to open up. Things are getting more free here. And you just talked about how your life, you've been growing with the Lord in this season, how your student body, and how have you, what has the Lord been speaking to you out of this season that's caused you to grow so much?
Well, again, we had COVID last year, and we had another massive situation kind of take over here at Christ for the Nations. That's another long story, but the Lord, when he put me back in, there was a growth in just a confidence and a boldness in my leading Christ for the Nations, whereas before we would always kind of pass it off, bring someone else in to help us lead Christ for the Nations. But he had birthed something inside of me that I just got excited and a passion for him and just the truth that he's put inside of me of what Christ for the Nations is for hope and life for the world. And so in that, through this new season, he's just built a faith, and I see what's coming to the world. I see what's coming to Christ for the Nations. This semester, as we opened back up last fall, we kept everything normal starting this January. Never had any issues, no more COVID cases, and I believe there's a protection upon this place that we have that we didn't have before, and that's because we have the right leadership over this. So through all that, he's just grown in me a confidence, a boldness to lead this place, and the students are there's a new generation of students that are coming in that have a heart for him, that we didn't have before, and I can explain that in time when we get in those questions.
Well, I do want to get to the point, not now, but I think as we get going, because the question becomes, why you? Why Golan? Why has the Lord placed this vision, this mantle upon you. And I think to understand that a little bit more, we have to talk about the legacy of the school. And so my question is, what is CF&I, Christ for the Nations Institute? I want to know, when was it founded? What's the story behind this school and its legacy?
Well, that would be for my grandparents, my grandfather, Golan Lindsey, and Frida Lindsey, my grandmother. My grandpa was a part of the healing revival back in the, I guess it was 50s and 60s, the miracles that were going all over the United States, the hippie movement. He was one of those main leaders that would travel about. And so close to the 60s, mid-60s or so, he was either going to put his headquarters, it was going to be in Dallas, somewhere, I think Shreveport, Louisiana, or maybe it was St. Louis. There was 3 spots. And he was going to choose where to settle down and stop traveling so much. He said the Lord directed him to go to Dallas, and he said because of what's going to happen down the road in the future. At that point, I guess JFK had just been shot, so Dallas was not the most favorable. So for him to choose that had to be led by the Lord, and what we see that's about to be happening now in this day and age, and Dallas is a hub for the rest of the world. But so he got settled down here in Dallas and was still having those tent revivals. He then started Christ for the Nations in 1970. The Lord told him, start this Bible college. The rest of his family said, you're too old. Why are you starting this? And it wasn't supposed to happen. But he said, no, I don't have a choice. The Lord's told me to do this. So right here in Oak Cliff in Dallas, Texas, he started in a nightclub. It was a rundown nightclub that he purchased and began to have meetings and classes, bringing in big names all around from the world and in America to teach people that wanted to grow in ministry. And so I'll just share a few things that he said at the start of Christ for the Nations that the Lord told him. Christ for the Nations is a new kind of training school, one substantially different from any existing at the present time. It was not to be a state-oriented institution with courses designed for imparting a general education. The institute, however, was to be something entirely different. The purpose of the Institute was to provide a 9-month training course to give those called of God an understanding of the practical side of ministry, such as how to be a soul-winning evangelist, a successful pastor, how to develop an effective prayer life, how to pray for the sick, how the gifts of the Spirit operate. Where he says it was not to be a state-oriented institution because he didn't want the accreditation part so the government can then tell him what to do,
how you have to do it.
And because he believes he wants God leading this place and no man telling him what to do.
I think just thinking through our 2021 eyes, you think of Bible school because there's so many. I mean, there's so many all over the country now. But in the 60s, early 70s, there was very few Bible institutions like this around the country. I mean, there were very, very few. And for someone to say, all right, we're going to have a place where people can come for 9 months and either get trained or develop their life with Jesus Christ more, that was kind of revolutionary at that time, wasn't it?
He said that there was no college like that at the time.
At the time, there was none. So that's before
seminaries.
Yeah, that's before Rhema and some of these others. And now, like I said, I mean, it's all they're all over the place now.
Yeah.
So your grandfather started the school after having some meetings here, and how long was he directing the school?
He was there for 3 years, and I believe on the 3rd year is where he had passed away. He was up on the stage. They just finished the new IB auditorium, which we still have here. It's our hub where the students meet every morning and come together, the staff, students, and we do worship for 45 minutes. But that's where he was speaking. He walked over, sat down, and then all of a sudden his head just went over on his shoulder. And they said he had a heart attack. He passed away just like that. So he was done, and my grandmother went to the back prayer room and laid down and cried out, I quit. What in the world? What's happening?
Yeah.
So she was distraught, didn't know what to do.
I guess I didn't realize it was the opening of the IB is when he passed away.
I understand it was the first, but it was the first time he spoke in that IB. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your grandfather, who has definitely pioneered this school, and he passes away after 3 years. Now talk about didn't God tell him to just devote himself to writing curriculum and books and things?
Yep,
during that period.
He did. His heart was, he was an amazing writer, wrote over 250 books. He even had, not saying this is the best thing, he kind of, you says you're supposed to have 1 foot in heaven, 1 foot on earth, but he seemed to be in the clouds all the time with the Lord 24/7. So at a Christmas time, my grandmother had to go upstairs and say, hey, it's Christmas time, come down, have dinner with the family, because he was just always so in tune with the Lord. That's something I'm learning. There needs to be a balance. I'm going to. The Lord's told me, and many people have shared that as well. I will lead CFNI out of leading my family, because family is very important.
You bet. So, how many books did he write in that 3 years? Do you know?
In the 3 years, I don't know. I know when he passed away, he already had 3 more years of teachings already planned out. He'd already written them.
He had already written his 3 years of teaching. You remember some of the classes that, or some of the teachings that he did in that 3 years?
I don't have that. I don't have any of that. I do know. I know that what he started, the DNA of Christ for the Nations that he taught on, was praise and worship, prayer and intercession, an emphasis on the gifts of the Spirit and spiritual warfare, evangelism and world missions, and short-term outreaches. So those are, I guess, some of the things that he would teach on.
Now, coming out of the 70s, and when the school was starting, there was a big, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, the Jesus movement, where these hippies are coming to Jesus Christ. And so hippies are coming to Jesus Christ with all their hippie lifestyle and all the baggage that brings. And there was a place here where people were getting set free and healed and delivered, not only trained for ministry, but people were starting to come here and get set free. Is that true as well?
Yeah. That is one of the main things, is they were not welcomed in. Those hippies were not welcomed in many churches and many other denominations. And so my grandfather, we were non-denominational, and he welcomed anyone in. If you say you love the Lord Jesus and you're going to serve him, it didn't matter what denomination or what you'd come from, you were welcomed in at Christ for the Nations. And he was so in tune with the Holy Spirit, and deliverance and healings were just, the Lord trusted him with that power to release that.
So your grandfather passes away. Your grandmother goes in the back. She weeps, I can't imagine. And then God tells her that she has to carry this mantle for the school.
Yes, she wanted to quit right there. She just,
I bet.
Because she had come in, so this has happened many times. Back then, women were not.
I was just going to go into that. Yeah, the idea of a woman now running a school was
it was
taboo.
None. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she had many of the board members and different ones that were trying to get her out. They wanted to then take over the school. She wanted to quit, but the Lord told her, no, you continue on. And what had happened, how she was able to take charge of Christ for the Nations, they were going to give it to somebody else. But the one person that had he was owner of the bank. He was not a Christian, but he had helped my grandfather build the IB. So CFNI owed this money to it. And I believe he told the board, either I'm going to I will close it down. You will not be able to. I don't know how it's called, but the CFNI owed him the money, and he was going to shut things down unless they allowed her to be in charge. He said, Miss Lindsey is going to be the one running this thing, or otherwise I'm not going to be. I'm going to take the money back.
So she was at the helm of the school for how long?
Pretty much, she passed away in 2010. She gave my father the presidency in 1988, but that was just a title without the authority. She still ran pretty much everything until, I would say, probably the mid-2000s, and then she began to step aside and then passed away in 2010.
A powerful lady. Any memories of her that particularly you can think of, that her leadership and how she connected with people?
The number one thing with my grandmother, and that would be my grandfather as well, is they had the power, they had the authority, they had anything and everything popularity. People loved them, but none of that went to their head. She lived here on the campus for 40 years in an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment. People would give her the millions of dollars because they knew that she was a rotating, a revolving door where the money would come in, and she would give it right out to missions, to people in need, to orphanages. And so she lived a simple life, didn't live with material things, luxury. She just simply knew her job was to bless people, bring Jesus to people, to the world, to the nations. And so she didn't have extravagancy. She just lived by her needs, and that to me touched me more than anything, because you see so many people that have everything in the world. They have the popularity, it gets the best of them, and then they fall. But